Okay, let's get started. I've gotten confirmation that you should be seeing my screen and you should be able to hear me. Welcome, I'm Shannon Taylor. I am Vice President of Client Services here at Virtual, and we're happy that you've joined us today. Not a new topic by any means. Certainly most of you probably this time of the year, if not a little bit sooner, are doing what we all do at this Q4 time period, where we look at our goals for next year, we look at what we've done this year, and we look ahead. What are we doing? What's our planning? What's our strategic planning look like? And getting folks in a room. Certainly been a crazy time of the year, times that we've never seen before, but hopefully what we can do is spend some time looking at how we might take some of the decisions and the challenges that we have before us and turning those into opportunities, and take a look at some different ways in which we can start the planning and dig a little further maybe than you have in past years. So let's spend the next few minutes together and see what we can dive into. So before we begin, a few housekeeping items always. We are recording today's webinar. The recording and the slides will be posted to the Virtual Inc. website. It will also be emailed to you. You are in listen-only mode. If you have a question as we go through the webinar, certainly go ahead and post that in the questions tab that you should see in your tools. And at the conclusion, we will have a survey, so we appreciate if you could spend a few minutes and just post your thoughts there. We are a CAE provider, an approved provider, so you will get credit for today's session. So let's go ahead, let's jump in. And first things first, what we want to spend some time on is getting your board focused, right? What are some of our experts' thoughts on where to go in that arena? We want to look at any strategic planning process has financial scenarios to look at, cash flow projections, taking a look at your revenue, taking a look at your ships, gaining, retaining members, looking at your value proposition. It's time to be honest. It's time to look at that value proposition in full light. Make sure that it is in a place where you're going to keep your members and hopefully you're going to grow your membership. And then making informed decisions, gathering the data that you need versus what a hunch might be. So taking a look at what the data tells you, that might be around member engagement, that might be around finance. It's data, data, data everywhere. So what can we do to use that data to answer some of these challenges and some of these decisions that you've got to make coming ahead? Okay, so let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Cudahy to introduce himself.
Great, thanks, Shannon. I'm fairly new to Virtual, year and a half on staff. Not new to nonprofits at all. Most recently, prior to Virtual, I was the CEO at the National Investor Relations Institute. Before that, held the same role at the National Court Reporters Association. Overall, I hate to say it, but I got about 30 years of experience in nonprofits, so I've been able to work with a lot of different organizations, both here at Virtual, as a consultant, on staff. So, you know, I think that we've all learned a lot about things and never seen an environment quite like this. It's never, you know, been necessary to have plexiglass between us as we were meeting in person, as we'll see tonight at the vice presidential debate. But I think we're safe here, and you know, look forward to a good conversation today.
Hi, I'm Julie Utano. I'm the Senior Director of Client Services at Virtual. I've been at Virtual for about 3 years, and I have over 25 years of experience on both large and small staffed associations, and have enjoyed working for the past 3 years helping associations achieve their goals.
Hey everybody, my name is John Lassard. I am coming to you from Townsend, Massachusetts. As one person so accurately put it, Townsend is not the end of the earth, but you certainly can see it from there. but happy to be here. I have been with Virtual a little over a year now. Believe it or not, 19 years ago, I worked at Virtual, and I worked in the events department. And in that period of time between working for Virtual and coming back, I was self-employed. I ran my own business for 19 years. I was a multi-unit franchise owner. And so I bring a little bit of a different look to associations and ways of running them and things that you can do and ways to accomplish things. So looking forward to sharing that today and working, of course, with Jim and Julie. They're great people.
Great. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you guys and your time today, your expertise. So we are going to go ahead and jump in. And Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. And thanks. You know, it seems like years ago that it was March and we, we're just dealing with the onset of COVID, and none of us really could have, anticipated how long it was going to be, that we were going to be immersed in this. And at this point, we really don't have a good idea how much longer we'll be in this new reality that we hear so much about. But the one thing that we've tried to emphasize to our clients over the past several months is it's time to stop apologizing every time we get on to have an online event. So hopefully you won't hear us do that today. You and your board have watched your priorities fly out the window to some degree. You've had to move events online. You'd have had to accept the limitations of virtual meetings. But now, it's a real good time to kind of rethink, what is your board focused on? Let's get your board refocused. You can't be thinking the same because nothing is the same. To borrow a phrase, you have to think different. So, we have over the past 6 months, among other things, learned who on your board has really bad internet. But it's also time to think about how you can rejuggle your priorities and think about getting things done that you might not have been able to do in any other year. And one thing that you have those priorities, the strategic priorities as an organization. You have your 3 to 5 strategic priorities like most organizations do. And inevitably, there's 1 or 2 of them that are number 4 or 5 on that list. And inevitably, what that means is that you don't ever get to them. So this is a year that, if your meetings moved online, if you've had to otherwise get rid of a program or service that you haven't been able, that maybe you had to pick your conference and cancel it. Maybe you've had, other ideas or travel that's had to be canceled, outreach and so forth. But, now's the time to dust off those priorities. Maybe you had an awareness campaign that you wanted to build. Maybe you had a rebranding initiative or a website that you wanted to get to. Maybe you wanted to put a deep focus on membership recruitment. You talk about it every year, but you're never able to really kind of roll up your sleeves and work on it. This is a year when you can talk to your board, look at those things, and try to get those things done that you wouldn't otherwise do. A bit of making lemonade out of lemons. People have time now. Organizations have the ability to pivot to things that they maybe hadn't been able to get to before. And we have an example of that with one of our clients, the American Association of Aerosol Research, and John's going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Jim and I can both tag team that. When it comes to the American Association of Aerosol Research, it's a client, like Jim mentioned, that we both work on, and they were looking to put themselves in the position of being thought leaders and sharing all of the valuable information and research that they have, not just with their colleagues, but also with the general public. And it couldn't have been a more opportune time to take that issue off of the back burner and move it to the front. And Jim was pretty instrumental in helping them coordinate a COVID symposium that they launched just this week on Monday, and before their actual conference took place. And it was a tremendous success. And I'll let Jim talk a little bit more about what's going to come out of that conference itself tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, so John was talking about a symposium that we had at the outset of the conference on Monday, but then we came up with the idea just a few weeks ago of, maybe what we could do is also, as part of the conference, have an online press conference, because their message really needs to make its way out into public discussion and debate of ways that you have a fighting chance to mitigate contracting the virus. So they have a number of experts that are participating tomorrow on a press conference, and they're going to have to retailer their content to focus on a non-scientific audience. But really, what we have the opportunity to do through this client is to reach out to the media and hopefully get a message out that genuinely will save people's lives. So, they were able to pivot. They were able to make that type of a change and you really think about moving that back to the front burner, the idea of looking at thought leadership in a way that they haven't been able to in the past, just because they have been so hyper-focused on their event. Once upon a time, I had a board member, one who wasn't really able to engage in the way that I think he'd hoped that he would, when he first signed up to be a volunteer. And as he was leaving, we did a bit of an exit interview, and I asked him, "What did you learn during your time as a board member?" And he thought about it for a second. He said, "I learned to sleep with my eyes open." And it really kind of crushed me that was kind of his general takeaway. But in this era where all of your meetings have had to change, it's really important that you don't just try to recreate your in-person meeting and just move it online. And just like we are counseling all of our clients and have a conference in the same exact way that you try to do it. And when you do, the technology tends to break, and the people's attention spans don't have the same type of attention span online as they would in person. So that is also the same for your board meetings. People have Zoom fatigue, so you got to change things up. Abandon those Robert's rules maybe that you've always had to rely upon and that you've had to be compliant with. Maybe you have more meetings and you have them at shorter duration. Maybe you bring on a facilitator. Maybe you think about doing some professional development. One of the things that we often hear from board members is, what do you want to get out of the experience of being on a board? They want to learn something. So maybe you can go out of your way to bring them some type of professional development as part of the experience of being on a board. It's why people want to develop professionally, and as part of the reason that they come to you. So maybe you are more deliberate about approaching it that way. Show a video. Make sure that your chair doesn't spend 60 minutes talking and then your meeting's over. You got to be very careful about how you're facilitating these online meetings. And I know that Julie has some specific ideas about how one of her groups takes this really seriously.
Yeah, Jim, one of my clients really took to making sure that all of their board members were engaged, and they did it in a couple of different ways. One, for each of their monthly meetings, they assigned a board member to that meeting, and it was their responsibility. At the beginning of the meeting, they do a 1 to 2 minute mission moment where they talk about either an anecdote, something they've seen, read, that reminds them of the mission of the organization. I think it helps set the whole framework for the meeting, where everyone's reminded that they're here for a reason, and it's to embrace the mission of the organization. And then at the end, they do exactly what you said, Jim. They do some professional development at the beginning of the year. They all submitted some ideas of things that they'd like to personally learn in terms of leadership, and they've covered topics such as value-based decision making, leading by influence. They did one on leveraging your membership talent, getting those members that you see at a meeting and getting them to volunteer, and it's been really successful. And it was an organization that a year ago were really into the operational weeds, and it's amazing the difference that these simple changes to the meeting have made to their functionality.
Every organization has one or two, hopefully not that much more of that, stragglers, I'll call them, on the board. Again, I mentioned on the last slide, who come to a board with the best intentions, but for one reason or another can't get engaged. And under the current circumstances, this might be the perfect opportunity to reach out to somebody like that and have a conversation with them about what's wrong, what would allow them to get engaged and to do what they intended to do when they arrived, which is to make a difference, right? So my suggestion on that is to reach out to them, for a conversation. Ask them and re-ask them what is important to them. give them a list of the, kind of those back burner issues I just mentioned, or otherwise. What is it that you would like to lead? What drives you? What's really something that you're passionate for? And let them then pick something new that they want to focus on, or what they want to bring energy to, and let them become the champion of that. If they own it, all of a sudden you might be now getting contributions from 1 or 2 board members who hadn't been carrying their weight before. And that can mean all the difference between, delivering exceptional value during this period of alienation, or, it just lets you get to some priorities that you otherwise wouldn't have. And again, make lemonade out of lemons, as part of the COVID, time period. And I'll just use one example of a member of my board when I was at the National Court Reporters Association. And she just, as it turned out, everybody thought she was just checked out and wasn't interested. But what she really wasn't comfortable with was making contributions in what felt like a big environment of 30 or 40 people at the board meeting with staff and volunteers and so forth. And so we ended up breaking up our meeting into smaller committee meetings. And once we did that and we got into smaller rooms, smaller groups, 4, 5, 6 people, all of a sudden she came to life and we got her ideas, and she, instead of wanting to cycle off the board, then she expressed an interest in moving up the leadership chain. So that meant a difference to her. And all I'm saying is, maybe if you just have these conversations one-on-one, take the time, don't make assumptions of why people are not engaged, you'll find a role for them, and it can be something that can be a meaningful difference. And as we, talk about pivoting, that's what John's going to talk about next. Or did I get that wrong and it's Julie?
You got that wrong and it's Julie. So now I'm going to revert back to sort of that back burner stuff, but considering pivoting to a short-term plan for the next year. And that doesn't mean you digress from your strategic long-term plan, but it means that you make sure you're taking your resources and you're really putting them where they can make the most impact. So take the time to plan. So many of our organizations that we work with, they're wait and see. Let me just wait, let me see what's going to happen. But really, you don't want to be reactive. You want to take the time to think your scenarios through and to have sort of contingency plans. You want to be proactive. You don't want to be like these guys. And when you're thinking about what your short-term goals should be or what you should be doing next year, make sure you include everyone in your discussions. Your volunteer, your board, your committee chairs, and even some of your members. Get the impact. You don't know who's holding the wheel when you're dragging that box of bricks. So be specific and choose just a few goals. I have a coworker who loves to say the rule of 3. Don't pick too many things. Does it add, it should be one of these 3 things. Does it add membership value? Does it increase the visibility of the organization? And does it increase the sustainability and viability of the organization? Don't try to conquer the world. And I think, John, you have an example for me here.
How many times a day do each and every one of you start talking and then you realize you're on mute? I mean, literally, how about a show of hands? I do it too much and too often. Anyway, to your point, Julie, the Association of Investment and Marketing Sales Executives, AIMSI, one of our clients, they have 3 big conferences a year. And then interspersed between those conferences, they also have regional events. And then, of course, with everything shutting down and not being able to have those conferences and those regional events, one of the primary things that they wanted to focus on and one of their goals was still remaining accessible to their membership in any way, shape, or form that they possibly could. So they spun off their regional events and started doing a series of webcasts that proved to be incredibly successful and well received by their membership. And it actually turned into a great stream of revenue for them as well that they otherwise weren't recognizing throughout the year when they were doing everything else. But I think, to take one of those goals, a few of those goals for your clients and say, what's the one thing that we want to remain to our membership during these difficult times? And for AIMSI, it was accessibility. It could be something different for your groups, but as long as they have that and they focus on that and they can follow through on that, they're going to come out of this looking real good.
Yep. Thanks, John. So at the end of the day, make sure your plan takes you where you need to go and be ready to change course as you're doing it. I mean, these guys had a great idea. You dig your tunnel out of the prison, but they didn't change course and then you're underwater. So make sure you're pivoting so that you're doing the right thing at the end of the day. So I'm going to also talk about cash budget and forecasting and your planning for next year. Sorry. So make sure you understand your cash situation. You know, we were all young, and some of you on the call maybe, and you knew how much you could afford for rent. You knew how much you had for utilities, what you had for food, and then what you could do for fun. And it's sort of like that for an organization. You need to understand the cash in your organization minus your restricted funding. You need to understand that equity and know how much you have on hand, and then know what your monthly spend is. So we like all of our associations that we work with to have at least 6 months of cash to operate should there be no revenue coming in. And it kind of gives your board peace of mind. We know we can operate for 10 months without any revenue coming in and we'll be just fine. And when you're looking at your budgeting, think every scenario through. I know there was discussion as to whether it was appropriate to have this toilet on this slide, but we're doing it anyway because I think it's a funny slide. And I think, you know, even the simplest of things, you think you've got it covered and then you don't. But you need to have these financial goals for the end of the year. Where do you want to be? Is it zero balance budget? Do you want to have 10,000 in reserve? Whatever it is, and then work backwards to do it. Right now, we have most of our clients probably have 3 or 4 budgets out there. They have one with the live conference, one with the hybrid conference, one with the virtual conference, and the different impacts that scenario makes to the rest of the budget. We had one organization that came to us and they had $64,000 in the bank and they were $180,000 in debt. And by working through all of these scenarios every month, looking at their budget, we were able to help them. And today, 2 years later, they're putting money into reserves at the end of the year. So this kind of stuff is really critical, especially if you're in a precarious position with your money and you're concerned about next year. You know, making sure you have all of that covered just gives you that peace of mind.
And also on that slide, Julie, what gives me peace of mind is that the toilet paper is in the right spot. So you're pulling from the top down, not pulling from the bottom up.
That's right.
And I think that's probably the most important takeaway from this slide is where they're put toilet paper's positioned. It's perfect.
Yes.
Oh, with 3 sons, I'd just be glad when there's actually a toilet paper roll on there.
Okay.
That's a good point. Hey, show me the money. I mean, hopefully we've all seen the movie, right? I mean, if you haven't, I highly, highly recommend it. And you remember the scene. Jerry, he had everything. He had it all. He had the clients, he had the money, he had the girl, and then in an instant, it was gone. That Bob Sugar, that damn Bob Sugar, if you've seen the movie, you know who I'm talking about. You know, we see Jerry go from being the king of the hill to holding a briefcase in one hand and then a bag with a goldfish in the other. I mean, quite honestly. And while, you know, we maybe have seen things like that with our own organizations that we work with, or maybe even your own organization, perhaps not so as catastrophic as that, but definitely we've seen an about face, and it's causing a shift in planning, it's causing a shift in projections, it's causing a shift in revenue. Events, you know, honestly have just taken on a new form. Membership might have dipped. And we find ourselves having to reshape and really reinvent ourselves. I know, Jim, that you have a story about SLA that you wanted to share.
Yeah. So, you know, and I think it's, you know, we have a client, the Sports Lawyers Association, and obviously Jerry Maguire would have been a card-carrying member of that organization if he was a real person. But in any case, you know, there's an organization that, like a lot of nonprofit organizations, they had a cash cow. They had their event. A lot of our clients are in that situation where in organizations, whether it's a certification program, you know, whether it's a magazine, once upon a time that was heavily relying on advertising as a revenue stream, you know, the organizations that hadn't been diversified, you know, this year all of a sudden you have to cancel your meeting, and maybe not only or you have the cash situation involved in your meeting or an associated sponsorships, but all of a sudden now you realize, well, most of your members were coming to you to get the discount for a conference. And then in SLA, Sports Lawyers Association's situation, you know, their members need continuing legal education units. So what do? We counseled and worked with them to develop some online programming, podcasts, webinars, and we're, you know, really pushing them to do blogs and other types of things where people, they now can see that there's a relationship they have with the association that's deeper than just an annual meeting. They now can see some of the value that they can get through this organization through networking and so forth. And for a lot of our clients, it's never been more important to show that you're more than a one-trick pony, that you have the ability to deliver value in lots of different places. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well.
Yeah, and you always want to be looking at ways to diversify your revenue as an organization, because as it says right on the slide, you always have enough until you don't. And sometimes when you get to that point where you don't, it might be too late. So you want to take steps in order to avoid hitting that pitfall. So you're asking yourself, John, what in the world is this slide about? What is diversify your cookie? What does that mean? Well, I take a little bit of a different approach, as I had said from the onset when we were making our introductions. I want everybody on the call and those that you work with on a daily basis to look at your organization like it's a business. But more so than look at it like it's a business, I want you to run it like a business. It doesn't matter if you're a mom and pop shop. It doesn't matter if you're a small business or a large business, a small organization or a large organization. Your members are your customers, and you want them to continually come back. You don't want to be chasing them to come back. You want them to voluntarily come back because they love the product that you put out on a daily basis, a monthly basis, and an annual basis. So you need to take stock of your inventory. I ran, as I mentioned, a multi-unit franchise. I ran a cookie business. Now, I can't even begin to tell you the ration of crap that I took from friends who just continually made fun of me for opening up a cookie store. They thought all I did was go to work every day and shake sprinkles on cookies. But there's more to that. So you need to really take stock of your inventory. This is what we did. What is it that I have to offer? How can I expand on what I already have? You may think all you have is a small chocolate chip cookie, as it's seen on the far left, but then it's satisfying, but how can I make that more appealing to the people that I'm servicing on a daily basis? So you make it a larger cookie, then you decorate it. You always are looking for ways to diversify your product, which will always diversify your revenue. Then, you know, go out of the box, think outside of the box. The picture on the far right, those are cookies that look like cupcakes. What an amazing idea. I actually can decorate that arrangement. Believe it or not, 3 minutes less per cookie. It's quite a feat. And if you're interested in learning how to decorate, I can show you sometime when we're finally back person to person. But what do you have? Jim, go ahead. You want to eat a
John, another bald man asked, you know, why if Taylor's turning 16, there's only 6 candles on her cookie.
You just can't fit 16, my friend. It's hard. It's really hard. You wouldn't see them. They would be so small. But what is it that you have as an organization? You know, what can you do to make it bigger and better? Can a press release become a blog? Can that blog become a podcast? And can you turn that podcast into a sponsorship opportunity? In 3 simple steps, you got to a revenue, a way to diversify your revenue. You're thinking of ways to, you know, increase those pipelines and have money coming in different directions. So, you know, always be looking for ways to generate more than one stream of revenue. You don't want to rely on that one conference. You don't want to rely on that one home run thing that you do to fuel your organization, because eventually that one thing will become stale. And, you know, I've eaten plenty of cookies in my lifetime to know that nobody likes a stale cookie.
It was about 15, 16 years ago that I had a new CEO at the association where I was working at, and he picked up a magazine or a book about value proposition and asked me then to go out and look at the concept. So I will say that at the time it was sort of a new idea, and over time it's really become a buzzword that I think as a result has sort of lost some of its meaning. It is critical, and it's intrinsically part of your brand. It's part of the experience that you deliver to members, and it's part of the products and services that you deliver. And when you're looking at it right, it's something that can really drive the success of your organization, which is something we really try to do with our clients. And what's important from my perspective with value proposition is that it is by definition about looking at your organization, your products and services, your member experience through the lens of your clients. It's the perception of your organization to your clients that really drives your value proposition. That's what it is. And from that perspective, it's really not possible so much for you to change your value proposition as it is to adapt to it. So it's intrinsically tied to your brand. It's what people really want from you. So it's important that you go out, you find out what they want, and then you go out. Once you ask, then you need to go deliver. And there's really the concept of me search that can be a real mistake that a lot of associations do, that they get a new president in, and then, or new president or chair, and the new chair comes in, and that year ends up being focused on whatever it is that chair or that president thinks or is important to them. So that can really derail your strategy. So my suggestion, if you want to really take a deep look at your value proposition and what you can do to adapt to it, is pick up the phone. Call 6 or 7 people and have direct conversations with them. It doesn't have to be a massive, market research exercise. It can be, and I strongly suggest that sometimes. But really, if you want to do something during this period where you can make a difference with your value proposition, pick up the phone, call 6 or 7 people, ask them 3 or 4 questions. Ask them, what do you like about this organization? What don't you like? What's the biggest challenge that you face as a professional or with your business or in your career? And what's one thing that you would change about this organization? You do that 6 or 7 conversations direct, and you go out to the rank and file. Don't just go to the usual suspects, and it will fundamentally change the way you look at your organization. It will make you want to adapt to the value proposition that your clients and your prospects and your constituents have already established for you. Let you deliver in a bigger way than you ever have before. And I also think especially during this period of pandemic, and it's a mistake that organizations make on an ongoing basis, that you kind of miss the forest for the trees. But content is king, so that your members are looking to you for content one way or another, whether it's through a webinar, whether it's through a conference, whether it's through a publication, whether it's your website, blog, you name it. But elementary schools have moved online. Government institutions that we consider to be horribly bureaucratic, the Division of Motor Vehicles, court systems, all of them have moved online over the past 6 months. They've shown that the impossible can take place. People have seen these changes. People are going to become less tolerant for organizations that aren't willing to do what they need to deliver value, to deliver content. And that's something that I just want to emphasize, that people are starved for content, and you need to feed them. And the last thing I'll just point out with relation to member value and member value proposition is, a lot of times we'll hear from people, from clients, and they say, well, do we build our value proposition first? Do we build new programs and services, or do we do membership recruitment? And it shouldn't be a choice. You can go out and you engage in membership recruitment. You can go out, get more people to participate in your programs and services at the same time that you're working on them. And to mix metaphors, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I would encourage you, have these conversations, see what changes you can make, on the fly. And at the same time, don't be hesitant to go out and do membership recruitment. A lot of people are hurting, not having events and seeing their membership dwindle as a result. Now you have to take additional steps to make sure you bring in members and do more to bring them.
And then you need to track your results. Do you have that echo, Jim? There you go. So you want to track your results, and as you can see from the slide, I'm just a movie buff. I love movies, so I go from Jerry Maguire to Elf. I mean, how can you make a better transition than that? And the old adage in business when I was self-employed was location, location, location. And I live with a woman who, my wife, she's a biostatistician. She spends her entire day looking at data, 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 and she loves data. Some of us love it, some of us don't like it, but it's very important to look at. And you know, the data that you have on your organization will not only outline your picture, but it'll also help to color it in. And what are your web analytics telling you? What are your social media analytics telling you? What are your open rates on e-blasts? What does your membership retention rate look like? Is your growth rate there? How does that data correlate to the environment at the time? Was it a booming economy? Was it a not so booming economy? Was your particular industry struggling? Was your industry not struggling? You'll be able to start to match those things up when you take a good hard look at that data. And you know, and use the data that you have to put your organization in the best possible position to continue to deliver meaningful value to your members. That data is so important to look at, not just, you know, once a quarter, but once a week. Really look at your organization's programs and what's that data trying to tell you. Is it telling you that maybe this event isn't worth pursuing anymore? Maybe this is something we need to scrap. Maybe we just need to start over. Maybe we can fine tune it. Maybe we can rebuild it. But when you really take a look at those numbers and you evaluate that data on a regular basis, it's going to help shape your organization and help drive you forward. And of course, without movies, you have to have a celebrity who just makes you want to go buy a 6-pack of Dos Equis. But look and then look closer, my friends, as he would say if he was on this webcast today. You know, all businesses use different tools to look at their performance, and they want to see what their bottom line is, and they want to see where they may be hurting, and they want to see where they may be prospering. Take, for example, just a P&L. Gives you a snapshot as to where you are financially. But what I have liked to do with the clients that I work with is create mini P&Ls within that P&L. Use mini P&Ls to identify those things that the organization is doing that is really working. It allows you to go deeper and just not get kind of a 40,000 foot view, but rather really get down to ground level and see, is this something that we should be doing? Is it something that we should continue, or is it something that maybe we shouldn't do? So I can take, for instance, the Association for Investment Management and Sales Executives that I brought up earlier. They would had 3 big events a year plus their regional events. They would lump everything into one, and then they would look at their performance overall. So what we encourage them to do, and what we worked with them as a team to do, is take those different events and those different regional programs that you have going on and create mini P&Ls for each and every single one. And they were able to get, I mean, their eyes were open so much wider as to where their revenue was coming from, what was working for their members, where they saw a large attendance, where they saw a small attendance. And it was all as a result of breaking everything down into bite-sized pieces instead of trying to eat that entire thing at the same time. Because while they were doing incredibly well, it didn't really give them a real good look as to why they were doing so well, or what could they improve, or what could they do as an offshoot. So you'll see when you do those things, it's not a lot of work. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of discipline. And that allows you to make adjustments and move forward with the organization to, reach its goals, create new goals. It may even, redefine their strategic plan and what it is that they're looking to do. But when you create those mini P&Ls within a P&L, it really gives you a crystal clear look as to what's working for you. Because as we know, that's not Jim in the bottom of the hole, by the way, everyone. I did find that picture online. Your organization can pride itself on running the Cadillac of annual events, as we've seen a lot of organizations just really have banked on those things throughout the years. And that's, for some, that's all they do all year, and everything rides on that one big pivotal moment. You have great speakers, you have a slew of exhibitors, you have networking receptions where there's open bar and they pass around those fancy little crab cakes. And I mean, who doesn't love the fancy little crab cakes when you go to an event? That's always just one of the most interesting things about the event. But then something comes along, and then you have a global pandemic, and in an instant you go from a grand event to sitting in your pajamas staring at a Zoom screen eating a bowl of Cocoa Puffs. So you've come, a complete a 180. Even worse, you're now maybe scrambling. You're looking at an entirely different conference format that you're not used to, and not maybe, unsure of how to really pull it off. Maybe you've even had to pare your conference down, and that can create a ripple effect across your organization, and it can really hurt your bottom line. So it's important to have multiple wells. I like to tell clients, have multiple wells that you can draw from throughout the year. Don't just rely on one well for everything, because if you do, it eventually will go dry. It's not a matter of if and when, it's a certainty that it'll happen. And you just don't want to go to that well continually. So create those multiple wells that are going to continue to bring water into your organization, revenue into your organization, and they're going to, they're going to give it, it's really its lifeblood. And if you follow that path, you're going to find yourself, when you're presented with an unforeseen circumstance like we're all in now, in a much better position to ride it out. And you're going to learn a lot about yourself as an individual. You're going to learn a lot about yourself as an organization and how you respond in times like this. And if you have a well-set plan and you do all the things that we talked about on this webcast, you're going to see that you're going to put yourself in a great position.
Thanks, team, John and Jim and Julie. I think what we wanted to give to you today was real world case studies, which I think the team did. And we want you to understand that the key for you is, if you're a staff member, if you're a CEO or an executive director, a board member, do something, right? It's Q4, just the beginning of Q4 of this year. There is plenty of time to take action. Make sure you have 1 to 3 goals for next year, right? Outline that with your board, work with your staff. What's the effort level going to be on those? What's it going to cost to create or maintain those goals, right? Do you have the appropriate people involved? Look at your financials, do it now, right? Explore the various scenarios. Look at X, look at Y, look at Z. Have contingency plans for those. Get your accountant bought in, get your accountant to create those, review as a board, get out of the weeds, pull yourself out, look at the high level, get at that 30,000 foot view. Look at what other revenue opportunities, maybe you've been on the outside looking at, we don't want to really hit our members with sponsor emails. Guess what? Those sponsor emails bring in some nice revenue. And we found with a couple of groups that they like the sponsored emails. They're getting value out of it. The sponsor gets value. Look differently at what you've had on your plate in the past and maybe said no to. Bring everything up. You've got to diversify, as the team noted. And then, as noted, look at that value proposition. Put it all on the table. We like to say, bring the moose out. Put the moose on the table. Look at every value. Is that member value actually adding a benefit to your members? Do you even know if your members are engaged in that value? What data can you look at to evaluate the pieces and parts that go into a great membership proposition? And then again, use the data, right? If you don't have data, start now. You have the time, you have maybe some interns that you could use to help pull the data, but the key is get away from the hunches, try and gather the data and use that to the best of your ability as you walk into this planning time of the next 3 months, and then as you get into 2021. So we've got one thing we like to do at Virtual is we're ending all meetings at least 10 minutes to the hour for an hour-long meeting. So we're going to take just a couple of questions with the team, and then we're going to wrap up in about 5 minutes so that you have time to get to your next call, grab a drink, grab a break, whatever you might need. So I think, team, what I'll ask, one of the questions that came in, obviously strategic planning sessions are changing, and we're not likely going to be face-to-face where we would have at the same time and the same period years in the making here. What tools, systems, or in what other ways are we now seeing strategic planning sessions being held?
Yeah, I think it's important now that you can't expect that you're going to get board members or other volunteers on a call for 6 hours to have a strategic planning session. So it's important that you do as much of the legwork beforehand and try to whittle things down to their component parts before you ever assemble. So we like to use a tool called Power Noodle for that. But you could use SurveyMonkey, you can use other tools to be able to rank order or to get, to brainstorm, digitally and not in person, and then do as much as you can to arrive with some level of consensus before you get to a conversation. And that way your conversation can be very focused when you have a board or a group of volunteers together. Julie, I know that you've been involved with this as well.
Yeah, I've used Power Noodle several times with some of my clients, and I think it really does help. It's a new tool for them. It helps engage them, and it's an easy way to sort of prioritize and whittle down some of the great ideas, and to just have people do a lot more brainstorming virtually without having to be on a Zoom call.
Mhm.
Yeah, to Julie's point, we've had a few clients use Power Noodle as well, and it really is not only just a time saver, but it does streamline what can turn into maybe a 2-hour sidebar conversation during a meeting, and really gives you a laser focus on what it is that that group's looking to do. So if you haven't used that tool, I highly, highly recommend it. I think Greg had turned me on to it. And it really was a lifesaver in certain circumstances with a few clients in terms of getting them to get their ideas out there and really figure out what it is that they wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice things too is that sometimes the idea that you end up picking wasn't one of the main ones. It was a comment that someone put in it, and this goes to that including everyone in the conversation. It really is a good way to involve everybody.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier about ways to engage stragglers, and this would maybe be an exact one to do. If you have had concern about the resources and who will lead the effort, maybe you can go out to one of those board members who has failed to engage and see whether this isn't something that they would be willing to step up and lead.
Yeah, and to your point, Jim, about the engaging stragglers, it brings up a very important point, is that we are really relationship managers, and knowing your board and knowing the personalities and knowing what these people are interested in doing and capable of doing is going to help you get the most out of them. So when you manage that relationship well and you really tap into, people, because not everybody has the same strengths. Let's be honest. I don't have the same strengths as Jim or Julie, and everybody on the call brings forth a certain set of, their toolbox is equipped with different things. But when you manage that relationship the right way, and you gain their trust, and you convey to them that you are really just trying to use the virtual, make your mark on the world, you're going to be able to get the most out of them and really move them forward in a way that they might not even think that they could have moved.
Yeah, and I would add even doing a Strength Finders sort of survey to your board members at the beginning of the year as we get ready to approach January, depending upon when their terms start. I've done that with a couple clients, and it really does help to understand who feels comfortable talking about what and who knows what. You'd be surprised at some of the skills that your board members have that you had no idea. And then you can tackle them in those ways and engage them in a way where they feel confident.
You've addressed a couple of questions, but there's a couple that are in the same area around change. Many of our boards don't have turnover every year or every 2 years. Many of them are looking at the same board members, and there's a concern with being able to get boards to change and think differently. How would you all address the outlook of boards being open to change in style in how they run meetings or what their value proposition is?
I would start with data. I think, when you have people like that, sometimes you're not going to change the way they sort of think with your words, but your best shot may be with numbers. When you start showing financial numbers and the data from your either surveys or just the demographical data that you capture with a member, I think data would be one of those strategies for a board like that.
Yeah, I just turn over the apple cart. It's as I said earlier, we see kindergartners doing online, program. We've seen Saturday Night Live delivered entirely, through Zoom. And I think it's, I just think it's time to, define, it's no longer a luxury to think about changing things up, you have to, and you're not going to survive if you don't. So, you know, if the only alternative, you know, is you know, death over time, you know, to your organization, you know, then what choice do you have? You have to go out and change, or you're not going to exist anymore. So, and I think that you know, we haven't, I don't think we've really done a good analysis yet. You know, we see all these small businesses failing all over the country. You know, a third of restaurants or something like that. You know, do you want to be one of those nonprofits that perished during the pandemic, or do you want to be an organization that used as an opportunity to reinforce the value that they bring to their community? And I just think that, you know, put in that type of, you know, dire, you know, looking through that type of a lens, I think it really puts things in different perspective. And I think, you know, got to change.
Yeah. To your point, Jim, and to yours, Julie, as well. You're so true on so many different levels. Changing isn't an option almost in today's day and age, and what we're presently going through as a world, you know, globally. If this hasn't forced you to change, I mean, listen, we all have to change in individual ways as well. I mean, if you were to tell me that I would wake up in the morning and be in the same clothes before I went to bed without making a change throughout the day, then I would have told you were crazy. But I think to, you know, your point, Julie, about when it comes to an organizational level, looking at data, numbers do not lie, and you can't ignore numbers. You could maybe turn your nose or turn your face away from, you know, someone talking about the need to change, and until you put it right in front of them with numbers and things like that, then they're going to have to, you know, switch gears and go with the crowd. If not, they're just going to get left behind. And you know what? Sometimes you need to leave people behind in order to move in the right direction.
Thanks, team. I want to be true to allowing folks the opportunity before their next meeting to grab that bathroom break and that drink and that snack. So I want to appreciate all your time. Jim and John and Julie, thanks for all that you do for your clients and for virtual. And if folks want to reach out, you can always connect with us on social media. There's an email there, virtualize@virtuallink, if you want to connect with anyone on this team, on this webinar, or anyone at our company. So feel free to reach out, and we hope that you'll take from this short time together that you need to take some action and go forth and prosper. And we wish you all the best of the luck with your organization and your success. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.